In the space of about 50 years, 8 of the most powerful civilizations on Earth collapsed, almost at the same time. Not one empire, not one war. 8. Cities burned and were never rebuilt. Entire writing systems disappeared and weren't seen again for centuries. And nearly 3,000 years later, historians still argue about what actually caused it. Because the evidence points to 4 different culprits at once, and none of them explain the whole picture alone. This is the Late Bronze Age collapse, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why it's still one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in ancient history. Around 1200 BCE, the Eastern Mediterranean wasn't a scattering of isolated kingdoms. It was one of the most interconnected systems the ancient world had ever built. Egyptians, Hittites, Assyrians, Babylonians, Canaanites, Cypriots, Minoans, and Mycenaean Greeks were all trading partners, sending royal letters, shipping tin and copper by sea to make bronze, and occasionally marrying into each other's royal families to keep the peace. Historian Eric Cline, who spent decades studying this period, has called it a globalized world economy, centuries before anyone would use that word. That interconnection was the era's greatest strength. It was also about to become its greatest vulnerability. Then, within the span of roughly 50 years, around 1225 to 1175 BCE, nearly all of them fell apart. The Hittite Empire, once a superpower that had fought Egypt to a standstill, vanished so completely that its capital, Hattusa, wasn't rediscovered until the late 1800s. Mycenaean Greece's palace centers, Mycenae, Tiryns, Pylos, were destroyed. Their elaborate writing system, Linear B, went silent, and Greece dropped into what historians still call a dark age that lasted nearly 300 years. Egypt's new kingdom survived, but only barely, and never fully recovered its former power. Ugarit, one of the wealthiest trading cities on the Mediterranean coast, was destroyed and never rebuilt at all. This wasn't a slow decline. It was close to simultaneous, across thousands of miles, among societies that didn't share a single enemy, religion, or government. That's the part that still unsettles historians. The oldest suspect is a mysterious coalition of sea-borne raiders that Egyptian records call simply the Sea Peoples. Egyptian inscriptions under Pharaoh Ramesses III describe a massive invasion by sea and land around 1177 BCE, naming groups like the Peleset, Sherdan, and Shekelesh, some of whom may be linked to later peoples like the Philistines. The most chilling piece of physical evidence comes from Ugarit itself, a clay tablet found still sitting in its kiln, recording the city's last king, Ammurapi, writing for help as the attack happened. The enemy's ships came here, my cities were burned, and they did evil things in my country. Ugarit was destroyed shortly after and never resettled. At Hattusa, archaeologists found the royal grain storehouses completely emptied before the city's final destruction, evidence the government was already failing before any final blow landed. For decades, the Sea Peoples were treated as the collapse's single cause. Most historians today see it differently. The second theory doesn't involve a single raider. It involves the sky. Paleoclimate researchers have pulled data from pollen cores, cave formations, and lake sediments across the eastern Mediterranean, and they consistently show a severe, decades-long drying period beginning right around 1200 BCE, sometimes called the 3.2 kiloyear event. For agricultural societies that depended on predictable rainfall, a multi-decade megadrought wasn't a bad season. It was slow-motion famine. Crops failed. Grain reserves that would normally feed a city or an army ran out. And in a world where royal power depended on a king's ability to feed his people and his soldiers, a famine severe enough could hollow out a government from the inside, long before a single enemy ship appeared on the horizon. Which brings historians to the theory most widely accepted today. And it isn't really a single theory at all. Eric Cline calls it a systems collapse. In a world as interconnected as the late Bronze Age Mediterranean, no single disaster needed to be fatal on its own. Drought triggered famine. Famine triggered unrest and migration. Migrating, displaced populations became the raiders later Egyptian scribes called the Sea Peoples. Earthquakes weakened cities already stretched thin by food shortages, and because every major economy depended on long-distance trade for the tin and copper needed to make bronze, the era's essential technology, the failure of any one node could ripple through the entire network. Pull enough threads out of a tightly woven system at once, and it doesn't fray. It comes apart all at once, which brings historians to the theory most widely accepted today. And it isn't really a single theory at all. Eric Cline calls it a systems collapse. In a world as interconnected as the late Bronze Age Mediterranean, no single disaster needed to be fatal on its own. Drought triggered famine. Famine triggered unrest and migration. Migrating, displaced populations became the raiders later Egyptian scribes called the Sea Peoples. Earthquakes weakened cities already stretched thin by food shortages, and because every major economy depended on long-distance trade for the tin and copper needed to make bronze, the era's essential technology, the failure of any one node could ripple through the entire network. Pull enough threads out of a tightly woven system at once, and it doesn't fray. It comes apart all at once. Not everyone fell. Egypt endured, though badly weakened, and never again the superpower it had been. Assyria held on and would eventually rebuild into a new empire centuries later. But the societies that depended most heavily on centralized palace bureaucracies and long-distance bronze trade were hit hardest, and some, like Mycenaean Greece, didn't just decline, they forgot. Literacy collapsed, monumental buildings stopped. Archaeologists find almost no written records in Greece for roughly 300 years after the collapse. A genuine dark age, sitting right before the world of Homer, which was written centuries later, partly as a half-remembered myth of the glittering, lost civilization that came before it. Drought, earthquakes, invasion, a trade network too interconnected to survive its own weak points. 4 theories, 1 collapse, and to this day, no historian can tell you with certainty which domino fell first. Subscribe, because History Decoded is where the real answer replaces the comfortable one.